Welcome to Far East Wargaming, bringing you another Heresy Thursday. I am Richard, your host, and once again joining me is Jason.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be back. It's been a while since we've done one of these Army showcases or Army profiles, so yeah, looking forward to diving in.
Yes, as Jason was saying, we're doing another Legion review, and this week we're looking at the 12th Legion, the World Eaters, the crazy ones, the sons of Angron. We'll see how much the Butcher's Nails is going to affect us as we go through this.
This has always been one of my favorites, and it wasn't until 2.0 that I actually had the chance to put together a World Eaters army, which is a lot of fun to play. If you like your Heresy very straightforward and charge, then this is definitely the Legion for you.
Yep, what I like about these guys is their color scheme is white, which is considerably hard to paint in the past, easier now. But with all the blood splatter, it means it's a very versatile one for those who are especially into weathering or new into weathering. It's very forgiving there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was in 1.0 a very expensive army to put together because most of its accessories, such as the chain axes, were all Forgeworld resin. But now with the advent of 3D printing, it's much easier to get a hold of these. With the new 40K kits for Khorne Berserkers, you can get some really nice plastic bits out of that. So yes, in addition to the painting, there was also the expense of this army, but is now much more manageable in 2.0, and it's a pretty powerful army in 2.0.
Yes, it is. And as with every Legion review, we always start with their Legion trait. And in this case, for the World Eaters, that is Violence Incarnate. And this reads, on any turn in which a unit with this special rule makes a successful charge, it gains +1 attack for the remainder of that turn, in addition to any other bonuses, even if that charge is considered a disordered charge there.
Yes, and this is very easy to remember, which is really good for Legion traits, especially when you're old like I am. +1 extra attack, it does stack with your normal charging bonus, so don't forget that. That's technically 2 attacks when you charge. And it is very important that the distinction is there, that it is still in effect even if that charge is disordered. And remember that some effects that happen on charging are affected by being disordered, some are not. This one is definitely not affected by it. Easy to remember and very powerful, and of course encourages a very aggressive hand-to-hand style.
Yeah, so regardless of what you're doing, you're always getting at least +1 attack on the charge. Very World Eatery, and actually plays into their rule set, as we'll see later on when we talk about some of the traits and the Warlord traits and also the Rites of War there. But it's a very simple one. Of all of the Legion traits, probably one of the simplest. It's pretty straightforward. There are really no exceptions to it, so very hard to forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes really well. Just remember ABC for the World Eaters, which actually stands for always be charging, because that's what you want to do to trigger this bonus and some of the other ones that they have.
Yeah. And now their advanced reaction. And this one is a reaction that happens in the shooting phase. And it is a version of a countercharge, as we've seen with other legions, but it is a bit different. So the advanced reaction is the Savage Tide. This advanced reaction may be made once per battle during the opponent player's shooting phase, when an army declares a shooting attack targeting a friendly unit with the infantry unit type under the reactive player's control, which are World Eaters. All models in the reacting unit gain a 5+ feel no pain against all wounds inflicted as part of the shooting attack that's triggered this reaction. If the reacting unit has already got a version of a feel no pain, you can choose which one. They do not stack. However, once the shooting attack has been completed and completely resolved, the reacting unit may make a charge following all the normal charge rules, targeting the enemy unit that made the shooting attack. This enemy unit may not make a reaction to this charge. So it's a countercharge, but you are still eating a whole bunch of fire.
Yes, I mean, it's not as powerful, obviously, as the Imperial Fists or perhaps the Space Wolves advanced reactions in terms of the ability to charge, or even the Emperor's Children. But it is very, very nice. I mean, that free 5 up, feel no pain, of course, is great. But remember, if this is against things that are strength 8 or above, you're not going to be able to get it, such as las cannons or missile launchers, because they'll be doubling out and instant death. But the free charge is pretty good. And if your opponent is not paying attention and you play very aggressive, which why wouldn't you if you're World Eaters, by running up your large squads of Rampagers or your assault squads or any of your typical World Eater squads, you want to be up in the person's face. And if they shoot at you, they make that mistake of shooting with something like bolters or something like that, then all of a sudden you're getting a free feel no pain and you're getting a free charge to add on to that. So yeah, it's a really, really nice reaction. And in my opinion, as we've stated before, any of the advanced reactions that give you free movements or charges in the opponent's phases are incredibly powerful.
Yes, a opponent of a World Eaters player needs to remember that for most weapons, if you've got into rapid fire range and they haven't already used their advanced reaction, you're likely to get it happening to you if especially if it's an expensive unit. So we're looking at things like, I don't know, some of these tactical support squads, things like this, or ones holding objectives, thinking that they can clear you off with a free round of shooting and forgetting that 12 inches they can charge you back. Can be a long charge, but it's a free try at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's really no downside to it. It's an advanced reaction that I've actually won a game with, where I had a key unit that actually pulled this off at a moment that not only did it save them with the feel no pain, but it allowed them to then charge in and save themselves from further shooting in that phase. So it's a pretty nice one.
Yes, and especially with the way that World Eaters tend to try and run larger infantry units, it's unlikely that these attacks will be wiping them out. And if they were going to wipe them out, you don't really have to use it. So yeah, definitely a nice reaction to have. Like Jason said, anything that charges out of turn is always powerful, no matter what the downsides. It just isn't the most powerful version of this. But it does happen in the shooting phase. So it's a out of turn and out of phase reaction. So it can be a nasty surprise to a sleeping opponent who has forgotten what this can do. So moving on from that, we'll move on to their Warlord traits. And they only have 3 Warlord traits. And funnily enough, for a Traitor's Legion, they have 1 Traitor only, and as you'd expect, no Loyalist only traits, which is kind of strange because there was a considerable Loyalist detachment of World Eaters, I believe.
Yes, this is true, but as we also remember in the Isfahan 3, this is when a large part of the Loyalist World Eaters were actually sent down first in the first waves, and then they ended up getting wiped out. Then Angron freaked out and he came down and tried to wipe out some more. So there weren't as many Loyalist elements in the World Eaters, which is probably the reason why we don't have a Loyalist-only trait here. But they do have some good ones. And starting with the first one, we have Blood Hunger, which is the aforementioned Traitor-only trait. Can only be the Traitor Legion, or Traitor Allegiance, of course, and the Warlord with the trait gains a bonus wound whenever a melee attack it is made causes a enemy model to be removed as a casualty. This can raise the model's wound score above the starting value, but no higher than 6. In addition, a Warlord with this trait, any unit joined must declare a charge in any of the controlling player's assault phases where there is an enemy unit within 12 inches. Line of sight of the Warlord must always charge the closest unit if possible. Furthermore, the army whose Warlord has this trait may make an additional reaction during the opposing player's movement phase as long as the Warlord hasn't been removed as a casualty. This is a really, really good one because you're going to be swinging anyhow. And so either reestablishing your wounds or getting back above to 6 is pretty potent. It's going to increase your survivability. The downside of always having to charge within 12 inches of line of sight, as we'll talk about in the Rites of War, isn't as much of a downside as you would actually think it would be. You do, as a World Eater player with this Warlord trait, have to just be careful not to get led around by a smart opponent, because if a smart opponent knows about this, he may just put some stuff either to bait you into charging, because again, it says nothing about something that you have to hurt or have the capability to hurt. It simply says something being within 12 inches of line of sight of the Warlord and its unit. So, for example, if your opponent notices that your Warlord and the unit that he's with has a tough time with contemptors or a tough time with vehicles, they could very easily bait you into charging one of those. So just be careful about that. But in most cases, there's not going to be any downsides to this, so it's a pretty good trade.
Yeah, I like it. This is a more powerful version of It Will Not Die, because you can gain multiple in a single turn, and it also allows you to be a bit less selective with how you tank on your Warlord if you know you're eventually going to get into close combat where he can recover those wounds there. Very, very world eatery, pretty powerful. I'd say one of the stronger ones just because of the ease of wound recovery there. And as you said earlier, the World Eaters are always be charging. So the goal is always to get him into close combat where this will take the biggest advantage.
Absolutely. It's a good one. So it's one that I take quite often when I'm playing as trader. It's nice to have those bonus wounds, as you mentioned. But there's others that the World Eaters have. So the second one is Cloaked in Blood, which has no allegiance for it. And it's a very interesting one. It says any model that does not have the Legion Astartes World Eater special rule must reduce its leadership within 2 by -2 when locked in combat with this Warlord or any unit that includes the Warlord. In addition, an army that has this trait may make an additional reaction during the opposing player's movement phase. So this is a very interesting one because it has a similar effect as Fear, but it is not Fear, and it has no words that say it does not stack with Fear. So it's a -2 to your leadership, which can be incredibly potent because what that does is it just increases the chances that your opponent is going to break should they have to take a break test. Where this trait falls a little short, however, is most World Eaters units that do hand-to-hand do it very, very well. And do you really need another -2 to the leadership in most cases when you're dropping something like 60 chain axe attacks or 40 phalanx blade attacks out of some units? Honestly speaking, you're going to probably be taking them down to Snake Eyes or Leadership 3 effectively, or Leadership 4 anyhow. That's why I don't see this one taken very much, just because, again, when it's going to trigger, you're probably already just taking somebody down so far to begin with.
Yep, I can understand what you're saying there. I would actually be quite keen on exploring how this affects units with the Inexorable or the Stubborn rule, because I know Stubborn increases your leadership to 10 on its own, but the Inexorable rule just means you're not affected by negative modifiers to your leadership from combat. I wonder how this one would interact with that. Would it drop your Terminators down from a leadership 8 to suddenly a leadership 6? Making a pretty tanky unit potentially flee off the board easier. I don't know. I don't know what the errata is for this.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I mean, we'd probably have to spend a little bit of time researching this, but because it says specifically that it's a -2, that to me reads as a modifier. So any rule that says you cannot be modified would not be triggered by this, in my opinion. But again, we probably have to go back and look at the specific writing of Stubborn and Inexorable, or perhaps even some other rules just to make sure whether or not this is in effect. But again, because it's specific to hand-to-hand, I just don't see this one used very often in comparison to others.
Yeah. And there is a final third Warlord trait for the World Eaters, and that's the Butcher's Claws. When a Warlord with this trait and all the models with the Legion Astartes World Eater special rule in a unit that is joined gain the bonus attack for Violence Incarnate, they also gain +1 strength for the remainder of that turn. In addition, the Warlord gains an additional assault phase reaction as long as he's not removed as casualty here. So this one here is stacking on top of what we World Eaters already have, so it's just a nice added bonus. Downside, I think, for this, it's only for the Warlord's unit, and with most of the weapons you'd be putting with the Warlord and a unit he's with, they're already getting, I think, generally a increase in strength here. I'm not sure if it's one you'd want to take in as opposed to something like the Bloody Hunger.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, you do raise some good points about it's not always going to be applicable depending on how the Warlord and the unit you stick him with is equipped. But for example, I can see some uses out of it that just spring to mind immediately. if the Warlord's with a command squad and regular power armor, or even Tartarus armor or something like that with lightning claws, now those lightning claws are strength 5, or even swords, strength 5, or axes, strength 6. So there definitely is some use there. Phalanx blades, which are a Kadiri weapon, which we'll talk about in a moment. A lot of units can actually take those if your Warlord's running with them. Phalanx blades are strength 1 native by themselves, but if all of a sudden your Warlord has this trait with it, then they become strength 6, which just makes them even more gross, uh, which we'll talk about later on. But yes, I mean, it is a bit of an interesting one. I would honestly say that Blood Hunger is probably better. And probably the other thing that I would just draw people's attention to is none of these 3 Warlord traits for the World Eaters actually have a bonus reaction in the shooting phase. So if that's what you're after, the only way to get it is going to be the Stoic Defender generic trait, which, believe it or not, with World Eaters is not necessarily a bad choice because you can do a lot of combined arms or even shooty World Eaters now. Debatable whether or not that's fluffy, but it's just worth noting that that's the only way to get access to that extra shooting phase reaction. And to be honest, with World Eaters, with the way you want to be aggressive and in the opponent's face, a lot of the times you probably want that extra movement phase reaction anyhow. Because, for example, you could, I don't know, in the movement phase, you've got a unit that is 11 inches away, and then all of a sudden you advance reaction in, or excuse me, you would react into advance into the enemy another 4 inches, right? And then now you have a better chance of triggering the advanced reaction in the shooting phase and getting a successful charge off. So those are some things to think about as you pick your World Eater Warlord trait from these or from the generic one.
All very valid points. We all do tend to prefer a shooting phase reaction because it's kind of become key in the latest meta for 2.0 here. And that being said, having the Stoic Defender trait is always nice. I think you get the pinning aspect of it, so it makes it easier for you to potentially charge without anybody shooting back at you there. But you're right, the goal of the World Eaters is to move up the board as fast as possible into the faces of the opponents, and taking advantage of a directional move forward in the movement phase as a reaction there is always going to be a plus. And again, it might be the difference because it might confuse your opponent who has thought, I'm safely out of this special charging range now, and all their plans go to hell as soon as you're suddenly 4 inches closer and no longer outside of 12 or no longer just on the limit of 12 there for a long bomb charge. It might make them have to pick a different target.
Absolutely.
So, moving on from the Warlord traits, we'll move into the World Eater's Rites of War. And there are actually only 2 Rites of War for the World Eaters, but they are actually, I've seen both used, and I think both have their pros and cons here. So taking the first one, this is the Berserker Assault Rite of War, and its effects are all units composed of models with the Legion Astartes World Eater special rule in a detachment using this Rite of War add +2 to the move distance when running. They also add +2 to the charge rolls made. All units composed entirely of Legion Astartes World Eaters in this detachment also gain a +1 to leadership to a maximum of 10 when making pinning tests. The Rampager squads may be taken as troops choices, but they do not become line. And Legion Predator squadrons may be taken as fast attacks instead of heavy supports. The limitations of this is all units in this detachment using this Rite of War must declare a charge if any of the controlling players' assault phases where at least one model is within 12 inches and line of sight of a unit, and always must charge the closest enemy unit. This may not initiate a multiple combat there. And also this army cannot take any allied detachments there. This is very World Eaters, as we were talking about, get up front as fast as possible. Adding those +2s to the movement, adding those +2 to the charges makes the 12-inch charge suddenly a 10-inch charge. Add on top of that everything else you can get, it's makes them very fast.
Yes, this Rite of War is so good. It does force you to build a little bit around it just to make sure that the limitation doesn't blow up in your face, which I'll explain in a bit more. But just think about it. If you're on a Dawn of War deployment and you've got your, your Rampager squad on foot, or I don't know, you got your, I always forget the name of the troop choice that comes with chainsword and bolt pistol, despoilers. Your despoiler squad with chain axes at the 12-inch deployment, all of a sudden they move forward 7, they run 6 thanks to the bonus. So you've already gone 7 plus 6 is 13 plus 12. You've gone 25 inches up the table in your very first turn. The very first turn, right? And then on the next turn, you're going to go ahead and move your normal distance, and then you're going to add +2 to the charge. So the threat range is incredibly long. Again, this also affects things like contemptors. So contemptors are already getting a +1 for the movement 8, and then they're also getting +2 to the charge now for that. That's 3 inches. This is very, 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 very powerful, and it allows the World Eaters to kind of close with the enemy very, very quickly. The fact that you can have a higher chance of not being pinned due to the leadership bonus is fantastic. Rampagers moving into the troop squad does free up some more choices in elites, but again, you're probably not going to fill all the elites choices, so that may not come into play too much. Predators with fast attacks is actually very good, because then you can take more things like Leviathans or Derrideos or heavy support squads that you normally would put the Predators into, and Predators are not bad, especially if you have things like conversion beamers, Magnum Melta cannons, the plasma cannon version. Those things are all very, very good. Now, the part you have to watch out for, because again, a smart opponent can actually take a lot of advantage of this, is you have to charge within 12 inches, the closest target. So be careful if you're running something like a heavy support squad or a Derrideo, because a smart opponent will go very aggressively at it and force you to actually charge. And then what that does is it ties you up quicker, prevents you from shooting, et cetera, et cetera. Let's say he deep strikes in an assault squad within charge range of your heavy support squad or your Derrideos, then all of a sudden you're going to be stuck in combat when you don't want to be in combat with those. So just be careful about this, and that's what I mean about kind of building your list around it a little bit. But these movement bonuses for running and for charging are just so massive. And if you're not getting into combat by turn 2 using this Rite of War, then you're not playing it right, or you haven't built your list properly with lots of melee threats that can actually take advantage and get across the board quickly.
Yep. The one thing I'll say about this is I think that if you are playing this Rite of War, you correctly, as Jason said, you're building this around, and those sitting back units in the back line aren't really the priority here. You're really trying to fill out your troop slots and elite slots with these close combat units, maybe getting a bit more transport out of the heavy supports with some land raiders and maybe a Spartan to safely get them up. But then again, those units aren't benefiting from this rule because they can't run. but they're still faster in general than the other units. And if you think about it, they can move half of their distance. You can get out and run. So in the first turn, you can get an even bigger threat range there if you line them up right on your deployment zone. So it's a very aggressive Rite of War, and it's for somebody who wants to play very gung-ho and aggressive. But it also means that your opponent kind of already knows what you're going to be doing. And if they're, built the correct way, tactful enough, they can try and stay as far away as possible by deploying on edges or deep in their own lines. But it will stop you from, it'll stop you from playing a defensive game. But you have to bear in mind as well, in the games now we play where we're a lot of objective holding, this can pull you off an objective very easily. So it can stop you from scoring, because one unit could be charged by multiple units close by. It doesn't have to be there.
Yeah, very good point about being pulled off of objectives. It's very smart, and again, because it doesn't say you have to. You couldn't have like an intervening unit of your own in the way. It just says if you're within 12 inches and you can charge, you need to charge. So yeah, all very, very valid points. This also favors a lot of very infantry heavy lists. Actually, all of the World Eaters stuff does favor infantry heavy lists. But again, yes, I think it's a really, really powerful Rite of War, and it's the one that I use quite a lot, and I see others using quite a lot as well. But the second one isn't pretty bad either.
Yep, the second Rite of War is called the Crimson Path, and its effects any unit composed entirely of models with both the infantry unit type and the World Eater's special rule. Ignore the first wound inflicted on that unit in each phase. No saves or damage mitigation rolls are made for this wound. It is simply discarded. No other special rules may be triggered because of it. Furthermore, all models with the independent character and World Eater's special rules in this detachment using this Rite of War gain the It Will Not Die 5+ special rule as long as they are outside of their deployment zone. This does not stack with any other It Will Not Die special rules that the player might have, and the controlling player selects which version of the rule they wish to use. Furthermore, Rampager squads in a detachment using this Rite of War gain the Line subtype here. Limitations are that detachment using this Rite of War must include more units composed entirely of models with the infantry unit type than the total number of units that include one or more models with any other unit type combined. And finally, detachment with this Rite of War can only use a single heavy support choice. Again, this is a very thematic thing for the World Eaters, but in a different flavor from the Berserker Assault. As opposed to being ultra gung-ho in getting into combat, this is going more along the survivability, the damage mitigation side of things, and allowing your units to shrug off some of this incoming fire.
Yes, it does require a little bit of bookkeeping, so I recommend that you have like some counters or some extra dice that are different colors, something like that, to keep track of it, because you need to remember which units it triggers on, and you need to make sure that you don't double dip on that unit if it's getting shot at by multiple enemy units or something like this. So there's a little bit of bookkeeping there, but it is pretty powerful, right? You shoot at my guys with 10 missile launchers and I just nope the first one. That's pretty powerful. Your independent character getting a free It Will Not Die is really, really, really nice, because you're almost always going to be outside of your own deployment zone anyhow, so it just increases that durability. The real big one on this, which I see a lot of people take advantage of, is Rampager squads getting line, right? Now, it keeps them as an elite's choice, but giving them line just means you're going to probably have so many line choices in your army, right? Let's say you got 3 or 4 units of Despoilers, Assault Marines, they're all going to have line. You've got a guy with a command squad, he's going to have line. You got your Rampagers getting line as well. I mean, you could literally spam a lot of line in your army list if you want to do that. It says also that you have to have more than infantry than any other unit type, but you're almost always going to be doing that with World Eaters anyhow. But I think that they kind of just did that just, again, for thematic purposes, but also this last one about a single heavy support choice. My guess on the reason why they did this is, like, if somebody was spamming a lot of heavy support squads, and those heavy support squads were just ignoring the first wound every single time, as well as maybe having apothecaries and something like that, then maybe it could be a little bit oppressive. But yes, this is a very usable Rite of War as well. I think it's debatable which one is more powerful, but in my opinion, and what I tend to lean towards, is Berserker Assault, just because movement is so important in 2.0, and especially with the new missions, sometimes only having 4 turns, it just makes it, much, much more useful to be getting that extra advantage of movement and charging.
Yep, I would go out on a limb and say that this is maybe more of a thinking man's version of a World Eater's force, because it is very much less straightforward. Not only the additional bookkeeping, and I've seen a lot of World Eaters players who use this just have a token that they put on each unit at the start of every of the opponent's phases to see how that goes. Then the fact is, you're not required to charge anything, so you're not pulled off of objectives there. So in scoring heavy missions, this is a lot more reliable, especially giving you that survivability of sitting on an objective out in the open a bit more comfortably there, because ignoring one wound here, and it doesn't say which wound it has to be, so you could ignore, for instance, in the plasma shots, you could ignore the rending or the breaching one from this, or you could ignore sniper rifles when they're targeting some of your independent characters there. You could ignore one of those rules. It's very versatile in how you use it. And it will not die 5+. It's a strong version of the It Will Not Die, because a lot of places in the game where they give you an It Will Not Die, it's always on the 6+, which is kind of not worth it in my opinion. But on a 5+ there, that's a 1 in 3 chance of it coming off and gaining a wound back.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree that it's got some strengths, and I agree that it's pretty good. I just tend to, again, lean toward the Berserker Assault because I'm just such a strong believer in movement, and free movement, additional movement, etc. So that's the reason why I really like it.
I think that's stemming from your Death Guard roots there. Free movement, and shooting. It's just movement and killing.
Maybe, I don't know, but I just like free movement for any Legion, honestly, just because, again, it's just so important in 2.0.
So, those are all the Rite of Wars, the 2 Rite of Wars. Moving on, we'll look at the World Eater's Armoury here. And it's, well, an armory in the sense, but mainly it's the special rules. So the first one is World Eater Berserkers. Any model with both the independent character and the World Eater's special rule that does not also have the Psyker subtype may be upgraded to a Berserker for plus 20 points and gains the Ravening Madmen special rule, and also increases its attack characteristic by +1 here. For me, I think this is a very specific use. This is for putting your independent characters with some Red Butchers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and to be honest, I mean, let me just read Ravening Madmen before I make a comment, because all these things connect, right? So Ravening Madmen, which is the second bonus you get out of this, or detriment you get out of this World Eater's Berserkers upgrade. Any model making a 2-wound rule in the assault phase against a unit composed entirely of models with this special rule reduces its strength by -1 when determining the score to wound. So you get less chance to be wounded. It does not, however, affect the strength for purposes of instant death. However, any 2-hit rolls in the assault phase targeting this unit with one or more models with this rule treat them as weapon skill 3, which is absolutely worthless, right? So yes, for 20 points, I get an extra attack. And yes, I get Ravening Madmen with a -1 strength of incoming attacks, but I'm going to get hit more often. So I don't think the bonuses are worth the 20 points. I think it's incredibly overcosted to basically pay for +1 attack and -1 strength on incoming wounding. That weapon skill 3 sucks. You're going to get hit more often all the time. And most of the matchups where you're going to be something like weapon skill 5 versus weapon skill 5, right? You don't want to be getting hit on 3s. You want to be hitting on 4s. Or if you are even against a tack squad, you don't want that tack squad hitting you on 3s. It just doesn't make any sense. And yeah, you're right. It's intended for if you want to stick an independent character with Red Butchers, but as we'll talk about Red Butchers in a minute, that's not necessarily a hot unit to be using in the first place, although it's very fluffy. I just think that the combination of this upgrade and this Ravening Madman rule is just worthless. I'm sorry.
Nope, I don't think any of those points are wrong with the importance of weapon skill matchup in close combat nowadays in this current rule set. Having a lower weapon skill than the opponent is extremely detrimental. I think everybody prefers the ability to +1 to your weapon skill in certain situations because it makes it easier for you to hit and also considerably harder for your opponent to hit. You'd be going from a 4+ to a 3+, and they'd be going from a 4+ to a 5+, which is compounding the issues in close combat. Right now, you're getting nothing for your weapon skill, so you're still hitting on the same basis, so a 50% basis there. And you're wounding, so you're getting wounded slightly less, but when you're coming against a unit like this, you're generally using stronger weapons. Going from strength 8 to strength 7 isn't really going to affect anything on a toughness 4 model. Yes, and it's also, the bigger part, it's not affecting the instant death capability of some of these weapons like Power Fist, Chain Fist, and Thunder Hammers. I think badly written. I understand where they were coming from for this. I think it's just not the best written rule or the best envisioned rule for this. It's trying to showcase the fact that they are psychotic and they are shrugging off the attacks, I guess. but leaving themselves open to more attacks. Very thematic, but in terms of usability on the tabletop, very much counterproductive there.
Completely agree with everything that you just said, and I have never seen a single person in 2.0 actually take advantage of this and stick a good combat character with Red Butchers just because Red Butchers are no good, and these rules are no good as well. Luckily, the next couple little special rules the World Eaters have in their army are pretty good. So Savage Fervor is really straightforward. It just simply says anybody with Legion of Astartes with a chainsword can exchange that for a chain axe at no points cost. So that's good. Chain axes are good. The combination of the +1 strength and the shred makes them actually really, really useful, especially when you spam them in large units. It is also worth noting that in general, when you're playing WYSIWYG, everybody should have a chain axe instead of a chainsword, unless you want to play just a fun game. But for competitive events or something like this, you do have to be aware that you need to make sure your models have chain axes. The Kadiri weapons is the last thing in the armory, and man, these things are pretty good. Not all of them, but some of them. And I would even argue in just a moment that one of the units or one of the model weapons is broken. They're pretty simple. It simply says the model with a Kadiri weapon can select one of the following when they want to, and any model with an independent character or character subtype and the Legion of Astartes World Eater special rule can exchange their chain sword for one of the Kadiri weapons for 15 points. But what is interesting is the Phalanx Blade says that a chain sword to Phalanx Blade gives you 2 Phalanx Blades, which means that you do get the bonus for having 2 specialist weapons. So let's talk about these real quick. So you got the Meteor Hammer, Strength +2, AP4, Melee 2-handed, Reach 1, which is great in challenges, Breaching 5 up, not very bad, not bad at all. Excoriator Chain Axe, Strength +2, but this is AP3 native, which is nice. Melee 2-handed Shred, rerolling the wound, Murderous Strike 5 up, but it's unwieldy. The Barb Hook Lash, which is Strength User, AP5, Melee 2-handed Fleshbane, which means you're wounding on 2s. You have Reach 1, which gives you that bonus for initiative, and then you have Rending 5 up. So again, not too bad. But here's the beauty of this list, and that's the Phalanx Blade, which remember is typically a pair of them. Strength +1, AP5, melee specialist weapon, but it is Rending 4 up and Duelist Edge 1, which again helps you in challenges. All of these have a use. The one that is probably the most common, of course, is the Phalanx Blade. They're just so good. You're getting the bonus for having 2 of them. You're rending on a 4 up, not a 5 up. If you happen to be in a challenge with your sergeant that has these, he's getting +1 to his initiative in the challenge. They're just so good. And because the units that can take Kadiri weapons can spam these, like Rampagers, a unit of 10 Rampagers, all with Phalanx Blades, is just throwing out a stupid amount of attacks at +1 strength, rending on 4 ups. They just butcher anything. Like literally anything you throw that unit into just dies, especially when you consider that you're getting a +1 to charge and you're getting a +1 for Incarnate Violence, which is the World Eater's Legion trait. These things are just so gross. What I've also seen is I've seen some units of Rampagers where they mix in a couple of the Meteor Hammers to take advantage of the reach and maybe get lucky killing a few models at a higher initiative, or the Excoriator Chain Axe to butcher regular dudes because of the AP3. But in general, spamming the Phalanx Blades is what you see is very popular. The only downside is that Forgeworld doesn't give you enough of these in a Rampager kit, but 3D printing to the rescue. So Kadiri weapons is really, really, really good, and I wouldn't be surprised actually if they go back on the Phalanx Blade to make it maybe something like a Rending 5 up or something like that if we have another rules update, as is the rumor out there on the internet.
Yep, the Kadiri weapons are pretty strong. I'm not a huge fan of the way the Meteor Hammer or the Excoriated Chain Axe are written. Yes, they are only 15 points on top of a Chainsword, which tends to be 5 points in itself for most characters there, so about 20 points. But for 25 points, you can get a Thunder Hammer instead of that Excoriated Chain Axe, which to me does more. It loses the shred, loses the Murder Strike, but really doesn't need the Murder Strike because it's suddenly instant-deathing most things there. The Phalanx Blades are the shining star of this weapon set, and the one well, you're right, everybody plays them when they can. They are kind of overpowered if spammed, especially in the volume most people are doing here. You're looking at for most units here, getting 4, if not 5 attacks on the charge there with these weapons. Rending 4+ means you're killing nearly everything on a 50% chance during the wounding phase, regardless of its strength. So you are murdering, the dreadnoughts and leviathans as well, because you're suddenly making them take a lot of 5+ invulnerable saves there. Very, very powerful.
Yes, and I mean, don't forget, because it's a character, your basic tactical squad sergeant or your despoiler sergeant can take these. And why wouldn't you give your sergeant, instead of giving your despoiler sergeant a power fist for 15 points, give him the 2 phalanx blades for 15 points? You're going to be getting a lot more attacks than you would with the power fist, especially if you would on the charge, as I just mentioned. And the rending 4+ is a 50-50 on every successful, hit to turn that into a AP2 wound. So yeah, very, very useful on these. And they're not just for rampagers. They're not just for Red Hand, which is the despoiler unit, unit for the World Eaters. Your basic sergeant dudes can take these too. So if you've got the 15 points, throw the phalanx blades on your sergeants.
Yeah, I can agree with that. If I think doing the math off the top of my head, I think the chances of killing an opposing sergeant in a challenge there who has a power fist is in your favor. That.
Yep, especially if you charge, because if you charge, your sergeant's getting 5 attacks to his 2, striking before him. You're going to hit with some of those, and you got a good chance to sneak that AP2 through.
Well, so moving on from all of the rules for the World Eaters, we'll move on to the units. And as with every Legion review we do, we always start with the Primarch. And in this case, the Primarch is one of the more famous ones. It's Angron, the Master of the World Eaters, the Red Angel, Slaughterer of Nations, the Undefeated. I'd like to add the Madman, the one with the butcher's nails, the one who succumbed to Khorne. But he's 450 points. He has a profile of Movement 8, Weapon Skill 8, Ballistic Skill 5, Strength, Toughness, Wounds, Initiative, and Attacks of 6, and a Leadership 10 with a 2+ save. His war gear is the Armor of Mars, the Spite of Furnace, the Butcher's Nails, Gore Father, Gore Child, some frag grenades. His special rules are Master of the Legion, Red Sands, Hatred Everything, Rampage 2, Furious Charge 2, Traitor, and his Warlord trait is Sire of the World Eaters. And if we quickly dive into Sire of the World Eaters, all models with the World Eaters special rule in the same army as Angron, including Angron himself, gain the Feel No Plane 6+ and Adamantium Will 3+ special rules. In addition, an army with Angron as its warlord increases its reaction allotment to 3 in the opposing player's movement phase as long as Angron is still on the field, but may only make advanced reactions.
He got a glow up. He used to only have a 3+ save for some stupid reason in 1.0, which made him actually much easier to kill. He does have Weapon Skill 8, which is on the high end for Primarchs, which is really, really nice. That Sire of the World Eaters Warlord trait, giving everybody in the army the Feel No Pain 6+ is actually really, really good, because in certain situations, it would actually, in certain army builds, it would allow you to skimp on buying apothecaries, right? Because if everybody already has a 6+ Feel No Pain, and then you got, like, let's say, attack squad with Heart of the Legion sitting on a objective, they're going to have a 5+ anyhow, thanks to that combination of rules. Adamantium Will 3+ just basically helps with your psychic resistance, and that's also very fluffy for the World Eaters. He's going to kill basically whatever you throw him into, right? Because the combination of Hatred, the Weapon Skill, Rampage, Furious Charge, and then the various weapons and armor he has, which we'll talk about in just a minute, just means that he spits out a stupid number of attacks, and those attacks are just going to kill whatever they hit. So as far as his other rules and war gear, Red Sands basically just says that anytime he can make as many challenges and their enemy models with the character subtype or Primarch locked in combat with him up to his current number of attacks. That basically just against certain units allows you to just challenge like 4 or 5 or 6 different models at the same time, and then you can just pair through them quite easily. And then, I mean, it just goes more and more complex. I won't read the entire thing. Basically, it just allows him to do more challenges in a given assault phase. The Butcher's Nails rule says that at the start of the controlling player, each of the player's turns after the first, he gets +1 to his attack characteristic for the rest of the battle. So basically, his attacks just keep climbing up the longer the battle goes on. And then again, combined with Hatred, Rampage, Furious Charge, he's just going to be killing a lot of stuff. It also says that if Angron is reserved at the start of controlling player's turn, then it has no effect, and his attacks do not accrete that turn, so you don't want him in reserves anyhow. Additionally, any to-hit rolls in the assault phase targeting unit that includes Angron always count the majority of weapon school as 3. This is a little bit of the downside with Angron. But again, the other rules that he has in the Initiative 6 and things like this, he should actually be killing your opponents most of the time, but it is kind of dumb that he has this ability to be hit very easily. Where this is really going to suck is then against something that's really durable, like Fire Drakes or other units that can actually tank his attacks, or other Primarchs hitting him on a 3. That really sucks. He does have a 2-up armor save and a 4-up invuln, which is pretty standard for Primarchs. And he does have his 2 close combat axes, which is Gorefather and Gorechild. Each of them are strength +1, AP 2, but they have slightly different rules. Specialist weapon, Armor Bane, Murder Strike 3-up, Shred. Actually, I take that back. They don't have different rules. My apology. And then finally, he does have a decent shooting attack, which is the Spite Furnace, which is a plasma-type weapon, 12-inch range, strength 7, AP 2, pistol 2. Does get hot for some stupid reason, so you could potentially lose wounds from him there. But it is master-crafted, which means it's not going to happen as often. Again, he's a blender. Just watch out. It doesn't mean that he can kill everything, because, again, getting hit on that 3 in return is not good, thanks to the weapon skill 3. But he's definitely better than he was in 1.0, where he could basically get shot off the table by missile launchers because he only had a 3-up armor save for some reason.
Yep, Gorefather and Gorechild, being only +1 strength, means that it kind of does need that Murderous Strike for the instant death ability there, because he doesn't reach that key number of strength 8 here for when he does strike at opponents. So if you're looking at that compared to some of the other Primarchs who are already with their weapons, most of them being not unwieldy, getting strength 8, 9, 10, 12 in some cases, with one particular individual there. But I think it's just the fact that you're getting the Shred as an inherent thing. He's never really going to miss wounding here. He's killing on a 3+ with a reroll. And generally with an AP2, he's killing most models on a 2+ with that reroll there. Very, very powerful, but as you'd expect with any Primarch. The fact that he does have the same downside as the Ravening Madmen, and he is kind of the lead Ravening Madmen, is very fluffy. But again, you're not putting him with a unit that is expected to receive a lot of damage after he's had his attacks. With the number of attacks he gets, especially later on, 4th turn, 5th turn, where he's getting 10 attacks there, I don't think many things are surviving. He's generally going to be hitting on a 2+ or a 3+, and wounding on a 2+ or a 3+ there with 10 attacks. That's most units gone.
Agree. Yep. All very, very valid points. And I mean, let's be honest. If you're on, again on turn 3, where you're at 9 attacks, turn 4, where you're at 10, and again, if you're charging 11 attacks, and then he does get the World Eater's Legion special rule with another bonus attack when he charges, plus Rampage and things like this. I mean, yes, he's spitting out a stupid number of attacks, but don't expect him to win a Primarch versus Primarch battle against the top tier Primarchs. Because again, him getting hit on the 3s is going to be the downside, and somebody like Ferrus Manus smacking him with his brutal Thunderhammer is just going to be ugly. So do just watch out for a couple of the tar pits or the other things that could cause him some problems.
Moving on from the Primarch of the World Eaters, we'll move on to the first of the elite options here. and as we've mentioned earlier, it's not really the best of the elite options which they have. And this is the Red Butchers for 250 points. You get 5 Red Butchers, 4 Red Butchers, and a Devoured. Their profile is a movement of 6 in Cataphractii armor, with weapon skill of 5, ballistic skill of 3, strength and toughness 4, 2 wounds each, initiative 4, 2 and 3 attacks respectively, a leadership of only 6, and a 2+ save. Their war gear is 2 power axes and Cataphractii armor. They have the Relentless, Bulky 2, Ravening Madmen, Fearless, and Hatred Everything special rules here. As a dedicated transport, no more than 5 can be put in a Land Raider Proteus, but any more can be put in a Land Raider Spartan as a dedicated transport there. You can get an additional 5 Red Butchers at 45 points each. Any of the models can exchange one of their power axes for a combi bolter for free. I don't know why you would. Any model in the unit may exchange all of their weapons for 2 Lightning Claws for 10 points per model. The Devoured may exchange any of his power axes for a Power Fist, a Chain Fist, or a Thunderhammer for 5, 10, and 10 points respectively. And the Devourer may exchange a Power Axe for a Minor Combi for free or a Magna Combi for 5 points. And finally, as with most Terminator units, the Sergeant, which is the Devoured here, can take a Grenade Harness for 10 points. We talked about these earlier, but Jason, I'll let you really sum up why these guys aren't the preferred choice.
Yeah, you would take your first look at it and you'd say, hey, they're not bad. Weapon skill 5. Great. That means they're hitting weapon skill 4 on 3s. They're hitting weapon skill 5 on 4s, but they're getting hit back on 3s in return. That's not good. Ballistic skill 3. There's no reason to take any shooting weapons, as you alluded to, because you're going to be hitting on 4s. So forget taking combi bolter, forget giving the Devoured any sort of combi weapon. And if you're going to be running all axes, or you're going to be running all chain fists, or you're going to be running Thunderhammer, Power Fist, things like that, why would you even take a grenade harness? The only time that that's actually going to be any use is if you're equipping these guys with lightning claws. But again, if I wanted a lightning claw Terminator squad, I could just take the basic dudes and not have the downside of getting hit on 3s. Ravening Madmen is just such a bad rule, and that's what makes these guys really bad. Getting hit on 3s in return is not going to be good. You're always going to be, in most cases, unwieldy, which means you're going to be striking last. So you're going to be probably losing Red Butchers before they ever even get to strike because of the fact that they get hit easier. That's what brings these guys really, really down. You would think that, being fearless and having hatred, allowing you to reroll is really, really great, but you can't stick any character with them unless you give him the Ravening Madman rule, which is overcosted by 20 points, as we just talked about, and then that guy's going to get hit more often easily. So again, it's just not a very, very good unit. I think the only way that you can really make this unit work, maybe the Power Fist or Chain Fist Thunderhammer combination on the Devoured to give him more offensive output. Maybe you don't throw them at other elite Terminators, but if that's the case, why would you take this unit? Like, you've got so many things that can just murder basic dudes. There's no reason to take this unit of Red Butchers. You're not going to get much value out of them. You're probably going to lose some before they ever get to swing. It's just a bit of bad rules writing, unfortunately. I think maybe if they had given them like a inherent 5-up feel no pain or something like this to kind of offset the getting hit easier, it might make them useful. But as is, I just don't think they're any good. Again, you're not going to throw them at other Legion elites. You're going to throw them at more basic dudes, and you've got other stuff that can just kill basic dudes so easily. So it's a big miss on these for me.
Yep, I can see what you're saying about these. I think you don't realize how expensive these guys are, because they're in Cataphractii armor. So they are heavy. That means they can't run. So they're not taking advantage of the Rite of War Berserker Assault, where they're getting an extra 2 on their run there. So that means you're going to be needing to put them in a transport. So you're either paying for a Proteus carrier or you're paying for a Land Raider Spartan on top of this unit price of 250 plus 45 for another 4 guys. So that's another 225. Oh, sorry, for 5 guys, that's another 225 for the 5 guys there. You're quite correct in terms of why you'd bother giving them any shooting whatsoever. And their leadership 6 being there is completely irrelevant, consider the fearless rule for them. And so is their relentless special rule, because like I said, you're not giving them anything to shoot with here. It's a very expensive unit. Fluff could definitely be used as rule of cool. They are a cool looking unit. They have a lot of fluff behind why they're there. Cataphracti Terminator armors, power axes. Again, very hard to find 2 power axes or just 2 arms to put 2 power axes on a Cataphracti Terminator if you're not using the official models there. So converting them is problematic because we don't get enough empty left and right arms to do this. So again, you're relying on 3D printing to come back and fill that gap. So, and also, it's taking up an elite slot, and there is no way for them to be moved into a troop slot like we have with some of the other legions moving their Terminators to troops. Again, unless you're taking the Pride of the Legion Rite of War, but why would you be taking the Pride of the Legion Rite of War when your own Rites of War are so much better than that? All in all, a missed unit here. Hopefully, they get a small glow up in a future rewrite.
Yeah, probably my last comment I'll make on this is they were really good in 1.0, and then people could make some really nasty Death Stars, combining these with a Primus Medicae and a Praetor. It was ugly. So my only thought is that perhaps they got knocked down a notch just because of how abused they were in 1.0, and it's a shame because they are lovely models. They are a very fluffy unit. The fluff behind them is really, really cool. So yeah, I am with you. All very valid points, and I do also hope that they get fixed in an update at some point.
Well, from out of favor to now the glow up in favor, we have the second Elite's choice for the World Eaters, and that's the Rampager squad we've talked about previously. And this is 135 points for 5 models, 4 Rampagers and a Rampager champion. Their profiles are movement 7, weapon skill 5, ballistic strength toughness of 4, 2 wounds each, initiative of 4, attacks 2 and 3 respectively, leadership of 8 and a 3+ save. Their war gear is 1 Kadiri weapon, or, as most of the time will be taken, 2 Phalanx blades, a bolt pistol, frag grenades, crack grenades, and power armor. They have the Furious Charge special rule. They're all chosen warriors, and they have the Stubborn special rule. A Rampager squad numbering 10 models or fewer that does not include Warhawk jump packs may take a Legion Land Raider Proteus carrier as dedicated transport. You can have up to an additional 10 Rampagers for 22 points each, making it a large 15-man squad. The Rampager champion can take a plasma pistol for 10 points. The Rampager champion can exchange his Kadiri weapon for 2 lightning claws for 10 points or a power fist for 15 points. Why you would, I don't know. And then he can also take artificer armor for 10 points there. Additionally, this entire squad can take Legion Warhawk jump packs for 10 points a model, making them pricier but extremely versatile.
These guys are so good. They're just so good. And I mean, let's just run through all the reasons why. Weapon skill 5, excellent. 2 wounds each, excellent. 2 attacks base, excellent. With two Phalanx blades, they have 3 attacks base. With the charge 4, with the Legion World Eaters trait 5, disgusting. You get the Furious Charge, and then of course you get the Stubborn, you get the Chosen Warriors. The only upgrade that matters at all on these guys is Artificer Armor for the champion, if you want to give them jump packs instead of putting them in a Land Raider or something like that. They're just so good, and they get those Kadiri weapons for free. I personally think they're a bit underpointed with your first 5 at 135, and then the next ones after that at 22. You can run a 15-man squad of these for less than 400 points, which when you compare that to a lot of the other Legion elites that do a similar thing, They tend to be more in the 400 range, even potentially pushing the 500 point range. Probably the only thing that works against these guys in comparison to some of the other units, like, I don't know, some Palatine Blades or something like this, is the only person that can get an access to a 2-up save is the Rampager champion with Artificer armor. They're really good, really, really good. Um, Nobody played Rampagers in 1.0, so I'm sure that had something to do with why they improved them a lot for 2.0. But again, I think they're almost, you could make a very strong case of whether or not they're undercosted. You could also make a strong case whether or not the Forgeworld models are ugly. I personally love them with their little spindly legs and stuff like that. I do think that they're really cool. But yeah, it's a really, really, really nice squad. And every World Eaters list, regardless of what Rite of War you run, should have one of these in it, just because anything you point them at is just going to get deleted, especially if you're just spamming the Phalanx Blades.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how to describe these. I've seen these. I've played against. I think I've played against these, and they're just not nice to come against. Inherently, with 2 Phalanx Blades, they've got a 3 attack base, basically, because of the +1 extra attack. On a unit that's charging, that's a 5 attacks base, because of the World Eaters special rules there. It's just a lot of attacks. 15 models all getting into close combat. I could see this also being extremely cheeky by giving 1, if not 2 squads Warhawk jump packs and deep striking them in for a turn 2 charge potentially there. Yes, they'd eat a lot of Overwatch, but if you're smart with it, Interceptor, but if you're smart with it, you've got other things to mitigate that. It's just it's hard to say don't take these. It's hard to justify not taking them, even from a don't be that guy point of view. I understand why you're that guy.
Yeah, I self-limit myself. So the Rampagers that I've built, and I still have some more that I've built that need to be painted with jump packs, I've limited myself in the sense that I didn't give every single guy Phalanx Blades. Even though I had some that you were nice enough to 3D print for me to make up for the ones that I didn't have enough of from Forgeworld. I have a 15-man squad of these. I only run 10 with Phalanx Blades, and I run the 5 with the Meteor Hammers and the Excoriator Chain Axes to mix it up. Because I think running 15 with Phalanx Blades is just not nice, to your point, because anything that you point these at, it's going to kill it, right? I mean, 15 guys on the charge are generating 61 attacks. Rending on a 4-up and hitting on 3s thanks to weapon skill 5. It's just unbelievably powerful. But yes, they have a spot in every single army, and I've seen some people that actually run multiple squads of these in higher points games, because those points do kind of add up when you do have multiple squads.
Yep, there, and they've also got the Furious Charge special rule for that. It's just a very... This is the unit that needs the Ravening Madmen to kind of counteract how deadly they are, because it's kind of one where, yes, it'll wipe you out, but it's got a chance of being wiped out on its own if it had that Ravening Madmen special rule. But now with the weapon skill 5, if you're going against any normal line troop here, or sorry, troop choice here, who has weapon skill 4, they're needing 5s to hit you after you've killed most of them anyway. You aren't attacking at a super high initiative, only initiative 4, so you could be taken out by some things like the Emperor's Children if they charged you first with some of their weapons. But the fact is, you basically have AP2 weapons. There's no really other way to look at it. This 50% of your wounds are going to be AP2. With the number of attacks you're talking about here, 61 on the charge, it's a done and dusted deal that unit is gone, unless you're having an atrocious day with the Dice Lords.
Totally agree. All very, very valid points.
So that is all of the units in the Horus Heresy Liber Hereticus. We'll move on to the HQ, and there is only one, and that is the captain of the World Eaters' 8th Assault Company, the twice unslain, the Ender, Khan the Bloody in the Horus Heresy, he's called, for 175 points. And his profile is movement 7, weapon skill 7, ballistic skill 5, strength and toughness of 4, 3 wounds, 5 initiative, 4 attacks, leadership 10, and a 2+ save. His war gear is the Cutter, a plasma pistol, frag and crack grenades, artificer armor, an iron halo. His special rules: he is relentless, an independent character, he is the master of the Legion, he has Rampage 3, precision strikes 4+, a traitor, and his Warlord trait is Savage Assault. If Angron is not part of the army, Khan the Bloody may exchange the Cutter for Gorechild for 35 points. That's always nice to have. And in terms of his Warlord trait, it's called Savage Assault. No enemy unit may declare a reaction against a charge made by a unit that includes Khan the Bloody unless that unit targeted by the charge includes a model with the Primarch unit type. In addition, you gain an additional reaction in the movement phase there. So Savage Assault really means that if you're putting in Khan the Bloody with a unit that is going to butcher another, well, their target there is no recourse in how to stop them.
Yes, Karn is pretty good. He is going to be a little bit expensive though, because there's no reason not to take the Gorechild upgrade for 35 points, which will put him at 210. And the reason why, because his regular weapon, the Cutter, is strength +1, but it's only AP 3, even though it does have shred, rending 4 up, and murder strike 6. Gorechild is also +1 strength, but it's a native AP of 2. It has murderous strike 3 up. It does also have shred. So it does have specialist weapon, however. So some people have made the point that Cutter doesn't have specialist weapons, so that does give you +1 attack with his plasma pistol. I still think Gorechild is much better because of the murder strike and the AP2. So it's a Praetor stat line. He can generate a lot of attacks thanks to all of his various rules and whatnot. And the precision strikes 4 up is really nice because when you're in combat with let's say a unit of different guys, you can use it to target perhaps the stuff that's unwieldy before it gets to strike. So that's nice. So he has that ability to kind of pick things out and do that kind of stuff. But really his Savage Assault Warlord trait, where it turns off reactions, means you don't have to worry about an Overwatch, or you don't even have to worry about a brace, right? Making you disordered or something like this, even though that doesn't affect your Legion trait. He's good. He's really, really good. I like to see him on a lot of lists. He's very, very fluffy. Ballistic skill 5 means he can shoot something and kill it with his plasma pistol, potentially when he shoots. Yeah, he's not a bad choice at all. And I think if you're going to take an HQ, unless you have a specific Praetor build or something like that you want to build around, or you just want to get active from one of the different Warlord traits, I think Karn is actually a pretty good choice to lead your list.
Yep. He's already pretty expensive, so why not add a tiny bit more to make him more deadly here? I've not seen him on the board yet. I don't know if you have one of these, but I actually don't want to see him on the board because he is that deadly, and it's kind of something that you just have to try and shoot off the board as fast as possible. But I've got a feeling he'll be riding a transport or heavily shielded by some meat shields there.
Yep, I do have him. He's just waiting to be painted, so you may see him on a battlefield near you.
Well, anyway, that's everything inside the Liber Hereticus, but there are a few extra units for the World Eaters, and the first of which is in the Exemplary battle units. The World Eaters were given another Elite choice, and this is the World Eater Red Hand Destroyer Assault Squad for 115 points for 5 models, 4 Ravagers and 1 Blood Bonded. Their profile is a movement of 7, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, and toughness of 4, 1 wound, initiative of 4, 2 and 3 attacks respectively, and leaderships of 7 and 8 respectively, with an inherent 3+ save. For wargear, they come with 2 bolt pistols, chainsword, frag and crack grenades, rad grenades, and power armor. Their special rules include stubborn, counterattack 1, bearers of the blood hand, ravaging assault, and bitter duty. For options, you can add an additional 10 for 15 points a model. The entire unit may have Legion Warhawk jump packs for 5 points per model. The Ravagers may exchange their chainswords for meteor hammers, excoriated chain axes, twin phalanx blades, or barbed hooks lash, so basically Kadiri weapons, for 15 points a model. Every 5 models may exchange one of their bolt pistols for a missile launcher with suspensor web and rad missiles and no other type of missiles, or a thunderhammer for 20 points each. The sergeant, the blood bonded, may exchange his chainsword for a power weapon for 10 points, power fist or lightning claws for 15 points, or a thunderhammer for 20 points there. The blood bonded may also get Artificer armor. He may also take 3 Phospec bombs for 10 points each, or a Melter bomb for 5 points here. And their rules, in terms of their special rules, the bearers of the Blood Hand, a unit that contains at least one model with this special rule, must declare a charge if they are able to at the beginning of the assault phase within 12 inches of an enemy unit. If there's more than one eligible target, the controlling player chooses the target and any charge is made. Note, this does not allow models to charge units that didn't shoot at in the previous assault phase. Ravaging Assault. On the turn in which they have charged, a unit containing models with this special rule gain +1 to the amount of wounds inflicted when determining who has won the combat. Additionally, they gain a +1 to sweeping advance rolls made in the combat when the winning side. These bonuses do not stack with other rules that increase the amount of wounds inflicted when calculating who has won the combat or results of sweeping advanced rolls here. So these are a really nice unit, but the one thing I kind of want to point out is, though all the Ravagers have access to the Kadiri weapons, the Blood Bonded does not.
Yeah, this is a pretty good unit. It's basically the World Eater's equivalent of a Destroyer squad. They do have access to the Kadiri weapons, as you mentioned, with the exception of the Blood Bonded, but in most cases you're probably giving your Blood Bonded something like a Thunderhammer because they're so good. They're not too expensive from a points perspective. They do have some decent rules, but what lets them down is, again, Rampagers are so good, right? So for a similar cost, you can get a Rampager unit with Weapon Skill 5, with a similar types of loadouts available and whatnot. And yes, there are some slight differences here and there, such as the counter-strike and stuff like that. But it's just because Rampagers are good that you don't see these more often. I have a unit that I've put together and painted and played before because it is so fluffy. But in most cases, Rampagers are going to be the superior choice, and that's the unfortunate reason why you don't see these more often.
Yeah, for the slight points decrease, you're losing the weapon skill 5, which I think is really the key there. You've still got really nearly every other advantage, including that counter attack. So you're still getting a lot of attacks on the counter charge. And I've got to correct myself. Actually, the Bloody Bonded does have access to Kadiri weapons because just inherently, character subtypes have access to those weapons instead of a chainsword. So it doesn't need to be listed here. He can get it. So you can have a full unit full of phalanx blades. Throwing up a bit in my mouth there for this.
Yeah, but good catch. We both missed that for a second.
But yes, it's definitely, to me, it's just a cheaper version. If you're running points, low on points here, and you wanted to add an extra unit here. This is a little brother to the Rampager squad here. They have, to the Rampager squad. They're cheaper as well if you want to give them, the Legion Warhawk jump packs here. It's only 5 points extra a model instead of, I think, the 10 points for the Rampagers here. Again, another downside, bitter duty. So they can't be joined by other things without bitter duty themselves. And I wonder how Ravaging Assault... Actually, the Bearers of the Blood Hand won't make a difference in terms of when using it with the other Warlord traits. It's still a 12-inch charge there. But the fact is they can pick their charge. I'm wondering if that is overlapped or overwrites the Rite of War rules.
I doubt it would. I would think the Rite of War rule would take precedence. Yes. You do raise good points about them being slightly cheaper than Rampagers, but Weapon Skill 5 is just so powerful. It's super powerful. Where I could see a use for these is, for example, if you were taking the Crimson Path, Berserker Assault, and you were making Rampagers troops, and you wanted yet another unit with Kadiri weapons in the elite slot, and you wanted to take these, then yeah, I guess you could go ahead and do that. They're great looking. If you look at the conversions from the article in which the rules were introduced, they're great looking models too. They're all in black, and then they've got like the bloody red handprints on the face. things like this. I mean, yeah, they do look really, really cool. But again, you're comparing these versus Rampagers, and I guess in most situations you're going to go with the Rampagers, even if it is slightly more expensive.
All fair points. I think if you're looking to find a way to put a cheaper unit with Phalanx Blades, this is the way to go. But then again, if you're looking to build something with Phalanx Blades, you might as well take the Rampagers. There is no 0-1 or anything like this restriction on Rampagers. So just go ham if you are going to be that guy. Just please don't bring them to Far East Wargaming. Anyway, that's all of the units in the exemplary battles. We have two last HQs that are from the legacies here. And one of them is a loyalist HQ, and that's Shabran Dar for 140 points. His profile is a movement of 7, weapon skill of 6, ballistic skill of 5, strength and toughness of 4, 3 wounds, I4, 3 attacks, leadership of 9, and a 2+ save. His war gear is Artificer Armor, a bolt pistol, the Liberator, a refractor field, frag grenades, crack grenades. Special rules are independent character, a feel no pain of 6+, rage 2, loyalist only, headhunter, and his warlord trait is bloody handed. He may be given a Warhawk jump pack for 20+ points. And the Headhunter special rule is when fighting in a challenge, Shabran Dar's attacks gain the Breaching 4+ special rule. And the Liberator, which is his chain weapon, is a +1 strength, melee, shred, breaching 6+, brutal 2 weapon there. Nice to have. Again, I think as with everything in the legacies, they never really updated them.
Yeah, he's just not very good, right? Because unless he's in a challenge, in most cases, he's only getting breaching 6 on his weapon. And he only has a refractor field, which means if he's in a challenge against any decent close combat independent character, they're probably going to smash him. And then all of your points are flushed down the toilet, especially if you added another 20 points for the Legion Warhawk jump pack. And not even a independent character, because again, if he's not fighting in a challenge, just a basic dude has a good chance just to kill this guy. And again, he's just not going to have much offensive output. Yes, it's brutal 2, but it's still brutal 2 at no AP. I guess the fluffy choice, just not a very, very good one. I don't remember what his rules were on 1.0. I think he was better than this, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't have a lot of comments on it because other than the fact that he's fluffy, he's just not very good.
Yep. The second one in the legacies is a traitor HQ, and this is Galan Surlak, and his weapons profile is nearly identical. Movement 7, weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 5, strength and toughness of 4, 3 wounds, I5, 3 attacks, leadership 9, and a 2+ save. He is wearing Artificer Armor, has a Needle Pistol, a Narthesium, Flesh Ripper, an Iron Halo this time, frag grenades, and crack grenades. His special rules are Master of the Legion, Independent Character, Bitter Duty, Sacred Trust, Traitor, and his Warlord trait is Abhorrent Augmentations. So for Abhorrent Augmentations, if Galan Surlak is chosen as your army's Warlord before any models are deployed, the controlling player may choose total of up to 3 Legion Tactical Squads and Legion Despoiler Squads from the same detachment as Galan Surlak to have the abhorrent augmentations. These units gain Bitter Duty special rules with +1 to their strength characteristics, suffering a -1 to their ballistics characteristics, and lose Heart of the Legion and the Line subtype. In addition, an army whose Warlord is Galan Surlak gains an additional reaction in the player's movement phase here. Torn between that one. And finally, his weapon profile for Flesh Ripper is a power weapon with +1 strength, AP2, melee, unwieldy, and shred. For 150 points here, he is just vastly better than his loyalist counterpart, even though he's not great.
Yeah, he got a big nerf because in 1.0 he had a little nasty trick where he could give multiple units feel no pain, or he could bump their feel no pain to improve it, and it was actually pretty abusive, to be quite honest with you. So they changed basically his warlord trait. Instead of augmenting feel no pain, it instead augments their strength, but in return, you get to lose Heart of the Legion and Line, which is, in my opinion, not a very good trade. Why would you want 3 of your units to lose Line? Not smart. Unless you've built a list where you don't really need your tactical squads or your despoiler squads to have Line. I mean, I guess getting +1 strength could be good. Combined with chain axes, it effectively makes them strength 6, which is really, really nice. Yeah, he's not bad. I mean, again, I just don't think that he's very good, and he got a nerf because of the nasty things that he could do in 1.0. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, not a big choice for me. And again, if we're also thinking about comparing him versus Karn, do you want this guy or do you want Karn? It's Karn all day, every day, unless you're playing some sort of themed list or a fluffy list and you're really leaning into what he can do. But I just don't think either of these legacy choices are very good, which is a shame because they both were usable, at least in 1.0. But in the case of Galan Serlak, he just was abusive.
Yeah. I think if you know you're playing a mission with no objectives that need to be scored by line troops, which I don't know how many of those there are. There's the kill missions, right, where you can win by just killing units. Then maybe his Warlord trait is useful there, but very situational. Whether you want to be putting him in a force for that odd chance that that's the mission you're going to play, especially in the tournament or things like this. I think he's very much a narrative game model or selection here. In terms of points efficiency, Khan is the way to go. He's inherently 25 points more, 35 on top of that if you give him a better weapon, which you could. Again, not the end of the world if you don't give him Gorechild. His weapon is already pretty good in itself there. But yes, both of the Legacies guys have, like I said, I don't think they've really been updated to be a preferred choice. I think with majority of the legacy units, they're kind of hoping that they're going to go by the wayside there and be left alone and no one's going to take them because it's units they're no longer supporting from the G-Dubs point of view. Anyhow, that is the end of our Legion review for the World Eaters here. I hope you guys enjoyed tuning in, and look, if we've made any mistakes and you are a World Eaters player and there's something we've pointed out that's fundamentally wrong or a tactic we have missed and overlooked there, please let us know in the comments. We try and go over all of these guys from an objective point of view. Jason does have and has played most of these armies, so he has a better view than I do, but it's always nice to hear from you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is one of the fun legions, even not just because it's a legion that I play, but I just think it's always been a fantastic legion in the fluff. It's always been a beautiful legion to see on the table when it's done well, i.e. don't just cover it in blood, please. And I think now that it's easier to paint because white is easier to paint with airbrushes and things like this, as well as the fact that you can get more easily access to or get an ease of access to chain axes and other things like this, thanks to 3D printing and whatnot. It's nice to see more of this army on the table. So this has been a real fun one to do for this particular showcase. It's been really, really fun to play. And yeah, if you have some other combos, questions, or comments, maybe something that we missed, then by all means, please share that with us because we enjoy the feedback and interaction.
Yes. I'm a big fan of the dip it in blood and turn it upside down for these World Eaters, so go ahead and go crazy. They are your models here. They are white. They did turn red. It's how much red you want to put on them. So look, from us at Far East Wargaming, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back in the future with some more Heresy Thursdays and some battle reports from the Horus Heresy. So stay tuned. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel to get notifications of our latest updates. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and leave a comment to help us with the infamous YouTube algorithm and try and increase our exposure on YouTube. It's always nice to grow organically, and we're looking for every little advantage we can get from our viewers.
Absolutely. Thanks as always for the support. We really appreciate it. Keep the comments coming, like, subscribe, all that jazz, and we will catch you on the next one.